Hello and welcome to QuickTale English. Today, we look at a modern story that remains a huge puzzle. The Malaysian Airlines Flight MH370, the Great Aviation Mystery. The date was March 8th, 2014. It was a Friday night in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. The weather was calm and everything was ready for a routine long flight. The plane was a Boeing 777-200ER. It was a very modern, safe aircraft, and it belonged to Malaysia Airlines. The flight number was MH370. The plane had a long journey ahead. It was traveling from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing, China. The flight was scheduled to take about 6 hours. On board were 239 people, 12 crew members, the pilots and flight attendants, and 227 passengers. The passengers came from 14 different countries, but most of them were Chinese citizens. All these people were starting a new journey, looking forward to seeing their families, starting a new job, or having a holiday. They did not know that this routine flight would become one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in aviation history. At 12:41 a.m. local time, flight MH370 took off successfully from Kuala Lumpur International Airport. The pilots, Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah and First Officer Faraq Abdul Hamid, were experienced and well respected. Everything was normal for the first 40 minutes. The plane flew northeast over the South China Sea. The pilots spoke to air traffic control in Malaysia. At 1:19 a.m., a controller in Kuala Lumpur told the pilots that the plane was leaving Malaysian airspace and preparing to enter Vietnamese airspace. The last voice communication received from the cockpit was the simple, routine message from one of the pilots: "Good night, Malaysian 370. Then the normal communication stopped. At 12:21 a.m., the plane suddenly vanished, disappeared from civilian radar screens. It happened right on the border between Malaysian and Vietnamese airspaces. Why did it vanish? Because the aircraft's transponder had been turned off. The transponder is a device that sends a signal to air traffic control, telling them the plane's identity, speed, and altitude, how high it is flying. When it stops sending data, the plane effectively becomes invisible to civilian controllers. This was the first strange thing. Turning off a transponder is highly unusual and requires manual action. It is not something that happens by accident. Then came the second strange thing. Military radar in Malaysia continued to track the plane for a short time, even though the civilian transponder was off. The military saw the plane do something completely unexpected. It turned sharply to the west. Instead of continuing to Beijing, northeast, the plane flew back over the Malaysian peninsula and continued towards the Indian Ocean. The military tracked the plane flying over the Strait of Malacca until 2:22 a.m., when it finally moved out of military radar range. For more than an hour, flight MH370 was flying silently in the wrong direction. No one immediately reported this strange flight path to the public. When the news of the disappearance broke, the first search was focused on the South China Sea, where the civilian radar contact was lost. It was only later that the world learned about the military radar track, and the search area had to change completely. The mystery now focused on one big question: why did the plane turn west? The search shifted thousands of miles to the Indian Ocean. This was a vast, deep, and empty area. The investigators used technology to find clues. They discovered that even after the transponder was turned off, the plane's satellite communication system continued to send automatic pings, small electronic signals, to a satellite owned by the British company Inmarsat. The plane's communication system was designed to send these pings automatically, simply telling the satellite that the aircraft was still connected and operating. These pings did not contain location data, GPS coordinates, but they did contain timing data. By analyzing the time it took for the pings to travel, investigators could calculate a large arc, a curved line, where the plane must have been flying. This arc stretched across the southern part of the Indian Ocean. The plane must have flown for about 6 more hours after the last military radar contact, until about 8:19 a.m., when the final partial ping was recorded. The search effort was massive. It was the largest and most expensive search operation in history. Ships, planes, and special deep-sea equipment from many countries, Australia, China, Malaysia, the US, and others, searched the extremely remote area of the southern Indian Ocean. The water there is over 4,000 meters deep, and the weather is often terrible. Years passed, and nothing was found. Then, in July 2015, more than 16 months after the plane vanished, a piece of aircraft debris was found. It was a part of the wing, called a flaperon. It washed up on the beach of Réunion Island, a French territory located thousands of miles away from the main search area, near Africa. The flaperon was sent for analysis and was later confirmed to be a part of Flight MH370. This confirmation proved two things. The plane crashed into the Indian Ocean, and the ping analysis that led the search to the remote southern Indian Ocean was correct. Over the next few years, around 30 pieces of debris were found on the coasts of South Africa, Mozambique, Madagascar, and Tanzania. All these pieces confirmed that the plane's wreckage was somewhere deep in the southern Indian Ocean. But the main part of the plane, the fuselage, the body of the aircraft, and the flight recorders, the black boxes, were never found. The mystery continues. Investigators considered many scenarios: a mechanical failure, a fire, or a deliberate act, someone controlling the plane. The official reports found no signs of mechanical problems that could explain the long, silent flight. The only theory that seems to fit the strange path and the transponder shutdown is that someone deliberately turned the plane around and flew it far away from its planned route. But the identity and the motive of this person remain unknown. The disappearance of MH370 changed aviation safety rules, especially regarding aircraft tracking. But for the families of the 239 people on board, the uncertainty is the greatest pain. They wait for answers, hoping one day the plane will be found and the world will finally know what happened on that ordinary Friday night in 2014. The case of Flight MH370 is more than a mystery. It is a permanent scar on the history of modern flight. Thank you for joining QuickTale English. Subscribe for more stories about history, science, and unsolved mysteries, and continue practicing your B1 English. See you next time.